cryptid upset, no one bothered to inform him of his tragic backstory. By Crimson Seekers. Part 4. Dabi wasn't really prepared for the astronomically strange feeling of walking into a coffee shop and having absolutely nobody look at him twice, either because of his scars or his criminal status. Compress had gone off to raid a small gang a few blocks over, and had sent Dabi off to get coffee in the meanwhile, as his quirk was incredibly distinctive, and they didn't want alarms about the League presence in Sendai being raised quite yet. Was this what not looking like a discount Frankenstein's monster felt like? Novel. It was probably his tense nerves from being so openly out in public that caused him to almost snap his self-restraint and cremate the person who slammed their hands down on his table when he finally sat down with drinks. "Hey, can we ask you a question for a survey we're doing?" He looked up to see the eager face of some guy with green hair and red eyes, flanked on each side by a woman with blue hair and green eyes, and a guy with white hair and blue eyes, who was giving him an odd look. Staring at them for a moment, he shrugged. He didn't really have anything better to do. "Sure." "Great," the guy chirped. "I'm Matsumoto Ryochi. This is Takahashi Sho, and the polar bear is Todoroki Natsuo." Dabi felt himself twitch at the name, trying to place it. Maybe he'd met the guy a few years ago and he just couldn't remember him? That happened a lot, so it was certainly possible. "Hashimoto Towa," he said in response, the fake name rolling off his tongue oddly. The guy with white hair, Todoroki. Ah, like Todoroki Shoto from 1A. That must be why he looked familiar. Choked slightly at his words. "Sorry, what did you say your given name was?" he asked stiltedly. Dabi raised an eyebrow at the question. "Towa. You know, kanji for lamp and wing." Right, sorry," Todoroki said, rubbing the back of his face sheepishly, as if his face hadn't gone dangerously pale. "I thought you said something else." Dabi hummed skeptically, but let the matter go. The guy looked a little sick, and he didn't really feel like getting thrown up on. He lived with enough infection risks as it was. "We're students from Tokoku Medical and Pharmaceutical Agency," Matsumoto said, skillfully brushing right along. "Our question is pretty simple. Do you think doctors should be friendly and personal, or distant and professional?" "I mean, a friendly presence is nice, I suppose," Dabi started, after thinking for a moment of the best way to answer the question, when the only experience he'd had with doctors he could remember was sketchy underground ones who helped him staple his body together. "But I don't really like getting casually friendly with people I don't know that well, so keeping the talk strictly professional would be the ideal." "So, a friendly demeanor but no questions asked outside of what's needed," the medical student clarified. "Cool. Thanks for your time." Dabi inclined his head in response, as the bubbly man herded his friends away. What an odd interaction. It was weird, talking to people in the medical industry about something other than how the fuck he was still alive. After a moment, he shrugged to himself, deciding that it must just be how people without debilitating trauma or mental issues must interact. Finally taking a sip of his coffee, he pulled out his phone to kill time while he waited for Compress to get back. "Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget, does my face really look that weird? This is the third weirdly visceral reaction I've gotten about it in as many days." "Mr. Steal Your Hands." "Well, considering that you usually look like an emo quilt fresh out of a tattoo salon to get piercings, and now the only thing you have going for you is the emo part, yeah, you look really fucking weird." "Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget." Did you just call me an emo quilt?" "Mr. Steal Your Hands." "You can read Japanese, yes?" "Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget has changed their name to emo quilt." Emo quilt. This is the best descriptor I've ever had. Mr. Still Your Hands. Fuck off, it was an insult. Mama Giri. Please stop before this turns into an argument. Himiko, what have I said about changing my username? Himikuer. Tonight? Emo quilt. The mayor. She's not wrong, though. How's it going in Hokkaido? Himikuer. Great! Me and Twice hunted out a local radical quirk discrimination group, and now we're at the spa. Emo quilt. Hokkaido has quirk extremists? Renter personality. Yeah, they saw Toga's fangs and started insulting her. Mr. Still Your Hands. I'm assuming you took care of them. Himikuer. They weren't cute at all, but they still bled super pretty. Renter personality. Yeah, they're taken care of. Fuckers are dead. Emo quilt. Nice. Colonel Sanders. See? Shiggy does care about us. Himikuer. Aww. Renter personality. Aww. Emo quilt. Aww. Stan. Aww. Mr. Still Your Hands. Shut the fuck up, I hate all of you like I hate everyone else. Colonel Sanders. Yes, but maybe you hate us a little less than everyone else? Mr. Still Your Hands. ... Colonel Sanders. I rest my case. Mr. Still Your Hands. Talking a lot of shit for someone in dusting distance. Colonel Sanders. You won't dust me. Who else is gonna make GameStop runs for you? Mr. Still Your Hands. I'm sure I can find an alternative. Mama Giri. Tomura, please don't disintegrate Hawks. Hawks, stop teasing Tomura. Mr. Still Your Hands. Fine. Colonel Sanders. Fine. Emo quilt. Mama Giri strikes again. Mama Giri. Dabi. Emo quilt. Sorry. Also, Hawks, we literally left 2 days ago. Why the hell are you back in Tokyo already? Colonel Sanders. I would be surprised you didn't know, but it's very clear none of you watch the news. I got a big meeting early tomorrow morning, so I decided to fly down tonight instead of getting up super early. Kurogiri letting me come over for dinner was half the motivation, not gonna lie. Mama Giri. It's always a pleasure to have you over, Hawks. Emo quilt. This is favoritism. Mama Giri. Perhaps. Mr. Still Your Hands. You've literally known him for like 6 months. How can you like him more than me? Himikuer. I mean, it's not hard. Mr. Still Your Hands. Fuck off. Mama Giri. I like Hawks because he actually gets the groceries I want when I ask him, and he cleans up after himself, unlike the rest of you. Himikuer. Shots fired. Stan. Kurogiri's disapproval hurts more than I thought it would. Emo quilt. Wait, are you saying that Hawks is responsible? Mama Giri. Yes. Renter personality. Well, that's a little unexpected. Since when the fuck has Hawks been responsible? Emo quilt. Yeah, Hawks, tell us. How does one do the responsible and become the favorite? Colonel Sanders. Trauma. Emo quilt. Understandable. Have a nice day. Mama Giri. On another note, Dabi, where is Compress? Emo quilt. Oh yeah. He went to go raid a gang a few blocks down. He should be back soon, don't worry. Also, is it usually this weird to go into a coffee shop and have people not look at you? Himikuo. It's fun sneaking around with no one the wiser, isn't it? Emo Quilt. Hella weird, but yeah, I get your point. It's nice not having people ask me if I need a medical professional. Colonel Sanders. I mean, you obviously need more than one. Emo Quilt. Fuck off. Hawks tried to repress a sigh as he checked the text from the commission, tilting his wings as he changed direction. He was already on a tight schedule, so of course, they wanted to meet right now. It was a short detour to the HPSC building, landing on the balcony outside the president's office and knocking. The door was quickly slid open by the president herself, who gave a distinctly unimpressed look at his method of entry. You wanted to see me? He asked, careful to keep a relaxed look on his face as he strolled into the office. He tapped his fingers along the can of coffee he held, taking a sip as the president took her seat. Yes, she started. Would you tell me why the League has been so erratic lately? You haven't been turning in your reports. Hawks knew he'd been forgetting to do something. He should probably cut down on his visits to the League a little. The hour flight time to and from cut into his already tenacious sleep schedule. Hawks, the president said, voice colder, snapping him out of his head. Please explain the League's current motivations. Hawks paused, running over the words in his mind. The League's current motivations. Hawks wondered how he could best explain that the reason Dabi burned down that church was to test the demon theory, or how Toga was only dropping all those exposés at the media because the files were taking too much space at the bar, or Shigaraki being spotted helping out pros at several quirk-trafficking ring busts was half to investigate, half something Hawks didn't want to touch with a 20-foot pole. After sitting in silence for almost a minute, mulling his thoughts over, Hawks decided to make a rash decision. He stood up, looked the president dead in the eye, and said, "You don't pay me enough to explain that fucking rabbit hole," and walked out the door, and jumped off the balcony. Flaring his wings out, and relishing in the harsh tug on his back muscles as his wings stopped his descent, he took another sip of his coffee as he fished out his phone, tapping out a text as he flew towards UA. Colonel Sanders, y'all are a terrible influence. Hitoshi didn't really think that anything could have ever really prepared him for his transfer into the hero course. Sure, Aizawa had made sure he was caught up on all the heroic-specific coursework, and he was actually ahead of his new class in other classes, thanks to Gen Ed having more rigorous academics. But he supposed he wasn't prepared for the atmosphere, or the socialization. The first thing he'd said when he'd been introduced as their new classmate was his name, and that he wasn't here to make friends. When he finally took his seat in the heroics course, the first thing any of his new classmates said to him was from Todoroki, who sat behind him to his right. The recommendation student had tapped him on the shoulder, and when he'd turned around to meet Todoroki's blank look with one of his own, he was simply told, "Friendship isn't an option here." Hitoshi had stared at him for a few moments, trying to parse out the possible meaning of the statement. Todoroki didn't strike him as a social butterfly, and his statement sounded less like an invitation to socialize than a warning. What? Midoriya doesn't give you much of a choice. He has a tendency to beat your face in with kindness. With that, he settled back into his own chair, and continued going through his own notes before class, unconcerned with Hitoshi's alarmed look. Hitoshi had turned back around after a moment, to stare at the green-haired cinnamon roll that sat in front of him. That was ominous as fuck. And it was true. Todoroki had told him that Monday. Wednesday, Hitoshi and Midoriya had gotten into an argument while sparring during heroics, and Midoriya had shouted some profound stuff at him as he beat Hitoshi's face in the ground, and on Thursday, he was being dragged over to Midoriya's table for lunch. Hitoshi really understood the whole beat your face in with kindness thing after that. So, yes, heroics was intense, in a way he didn't expect or really prepare for. So when the number 2 hero burst into homeroom, chugging canned coffee and looking vaguely like he regretted life under a strained smile, Hitoshi spared a thought as to why he was surprised by anything anymore. "What's up, chickadees?" Hawks chirped, as he strolled into the room. Aizawa's frustrated sigh was mirrored by Tokoyami, dropping his head onto his desk with a thud. Hitoshi wondered for a moment why Tokoyami would have such a strong reaction to his mentor's appearance, before comparing Hawks's bright smile to revelry in the dark, and answering the question for himself. "Hawks," Aizawa greeted, in a less than pleasant tone. "I hope you have a reason to be here." Yeah, don't worry," Hawks said, tossing the empty coffee can over his shoulder and landing it perfectly in the trash can. Hitoshi felt slightly tempted to clap at the trick shot, as he reached into his jacket and took out a file, handing it over. "Release forms. I'm here to pick up some first-year interns and escort them over to where we're having a meeting. Genus and Edshot are picking up the second and third years." Hitoshi had no idea what the meeting was, but Aizawa nodded knowingly as he flipped through the file Hawks handed him, eyes critically scanning over each page. "Everything seems to be in order," he grunted after a few moments, turning his attention back to the students. "Jiro, Shoji, Sero, Ida, Tokoyami, Kirishima, Uraraka, Asui, Bakugo, and Yaoyorozu. Pack your bags and collect your cases," he called, each named student straightening up as he pulled out the remote and released the cases containing their hero costumes from the wall. "Your work studies are beginning early today. You will not be headed to your mentor's agency as you usually are, so Hawks will be escorting you to location." "I know you still have a class to teach, so do you want me to send you the spark notes of the meeting afterwards?" Hawks asked their teacher, as all the named students stood up from their desks. Aizawa grunted, tilting his head ever so slightly in thought before he spoke. "Shinso," he called, and Hitoshi shot up straight in his seat as Aizawa looked at him. Aizawa made a quick beckoning gesture, and he quickly made his way up to the front. "This is Shinso Hitoshi, my intern," Aizawa announced bluntly. "I'll send him as my proxy." Glancing at Hitoshi, he said, "Shinso, this is Hawks. Consider him your mentor for the day." "Well, this isn't sudden at all," Hitoshi muttered under his breath. Going by the way Aizawa rolled his eyes, and Hawks gave a small chuckle. He wasn't quiet enough. "Go get your stuff, Chicklet," Hawks said, smiling. "You can hang with me and secure me for the day." At Aizawa's pointed look, he added, "I'll make sure he doesn't get hurt, don't worry about that." "Hearing that statement from you of all people only makes me worry more," he heard the tired man grumble in response, as he retrieved his case. Hitoshi found himself sticking close to Hawks and Tokoyami, as the hero packed up some kids from 1B and herded the students out of the school, and onto a bus that was to take them all to location. Sure, he sat with Asui and Uraraka at lunch, but he didn't really know how to talk to them. Hawks, he supposed, was his mentor for the day, and he knew Tokoyami could also appreciate silence, and was unlikely to bother him with small talk. "So you're the kid with the brainwashing quirk, right?" However, that did not prevent Hawks from being a small talker himself. "Yeah, what of it?" he said sullenly in response. his body already tensing defensively. To his surprise, however, Hawks completely lit up at the revelation. "You're incredible! I was super disappointed you weren't in the hero course. I had so many people I wanted to pester into taking you as an intern." "You didn't want to take me in as an intern yourself?" Hitoshi asked, raising an eyebrow as he tried to suppress the pleased flush that threatened to rise in his face. I absolutely would've," Hawk said, shifting forward in his seat slightly to spread his wings a bit further. "I'm just not sure I have much to teach you. Your quirk is voice-based, right?" Hitoshi nodded. "I'm primarily a spotlight hero, and if you're interning with a Razorhead, I'm assuming you intend to go underground. I can give a few tips for that, and maybe teach you a few bird noises, how to deal with heights, maybe complex multitasking if you're able to control more than one person at a time, though that would have been a gamble. But beyond that, I probably wouldn't have much to teach you for the week." "I have several questions about that statement," Hitoshi said, and when Hawks nodded obligingly, he continued. "My first question is, bird noises?" Hawks smirked at him and let out a low, rumbling coo. Hitoshi blinked. "You want some breadcrumbs with that?" he asked. And wow, he should really learn how to keep his mouth shut. Luckily, Hawks was a hero with a sense of humor, and laughed at his comment. "You're not the first to basically call me a pigeon. Don't worry about it." "Okay," Hitoshi said, a bit off kilter, before continuing on with his next question. "You said you could give me a few tips for underground work? But you're not an underground hero. You're literally the opposite of that." Hawks shrugged. "I took a lot of night patrols when I first started out, and I still take about 2 a week. Hero rankings are heavily based on popularity and crime and case-solving rates of the season, but also incorporates overall crime and case rates from the course of your career." He shrugged. "Working double or triple shifts every day is how I was able to reach the top 10 so fast, because I had to compensate for not having that kind of history with underground work. So I'm pretty familiar with the operations of underground heroes, since I work with them pretty often enough. I've also done a bit of undercover work, which you have the potential to be pretty good at." "Undercover work?" Hitoshi asked, giving Hawks' bright red wings a pointed look over. Hawks laughed. "Yep. As long as you keep an open mind to those around you, you already have most of the tools you need to be good at it, and with some refining, you'll be great." "Really?" Hitoshi asked, beginning to get drawn in by the prospect. Aizawa had mentioned undercover work in passing to him, but had recommended that he go to another underground hero for advice on the subject, not having done much of it himself. Hawks nodded. "You're pretty charismatic, which makes sense with your quirk, and if you're underground, you'll be an unknown, so there's a relatively small chance of them identifying you. And if the way you got tensed up when I mentioned your quirk before is any indication, you already have your tragic backstory and villainy reasons already laid out for you." "I'm not a villain," Hitoshi snapped, almost on instinct. Hawks held up his hands placatingly. "I'm not saying that you are," he said. "I'm just saying that when you go undercover, sticking as close to your personal history as possible is ideal, since you're less likely to forget anything. Just tweak some stuff, say you never made it into the hero course and became bitter or something, and bam!" Hawks clapped his hands. "Tragic backstory and villain origins. And since it's personal, your body language will be more natural as well." He shrugged. "Take all your hero-related trauma growing up, and there you have your cover. That's what I do." "You have hero-related trauma?" Hitoshi asked, mouth moving faster than his brain was able to say. That's a bit of a dick question. Luckily, Hawks was probably one of the most chill heroes he'd ever met, and didn't seem to take it personally, and simply shrugged it off. "I'm the number 2 hero at 23. Doesn't come with a clean psyche, kid." Hitoshi shifted uncomfortably in his seat, not quite sure what to say in response to such a nonchalant admission. Hawks was right, in a sense, about him being charismatic, but he was only charismatic in getting people to talk back to him. He wasn't, however, skilled in talking to people who were way too casual about their trauma. Talking to Hawks was reminiscent of talking to Todoroki, and that was something he never thought he'd say. Luckily, Bakugo was here to save the day, which was a day of firsts because that was another thing Hitoshi never thought he'd say. "Hey, chicken legs!" Bakugo called over the noise of the bus. Hawks looked away from Hitoshi, identifying Bakugo's scowling face with a smile. "What's up, explosion genist?" Hitoshi choked. He couldn't believe Hawks went there, and going by the sweet scent of burning caramel that suddenly began drifting through the bus, neither could explosion genist. After a few moments, wherein Hitoshi was pretty confident he could hear Bakugo grinding his teeth into dust, he spoke. "Where the hell are you taking us?" "Oh, right," Hawk said, perking up as he clacked his hands together. "Listen up, chickadees," he called over the noise of the bus, quickly gaining all of their attention. "I know that work studies only started up back again last week, so you've probably been pretty busy, and that for some of you, you're either at a new agency or this is your first work study. And as a result, your mentors probably haven't had a chance to explain what's going on." "So you're gonna tell us all why we're here?" Uraraka asked, raising her hand. Hawks nodded. "Yup. I'm assuming you're all keeping up with the news, so you've heard of that super team-up thing Genist, Edgeshot, Mirako, and I have organized?" There was a wave of affirmative nods and murmurs before Hawks continued. "Congratulations! All of your agencies you're at for work studies are part of this. Your mentors decided to have all of you attend the first meeting, so that you get some big team-up experience, and are aware of the details of what you're likely going to be working on for the rest of your work studies." "So we're going to be working missing person cases, right? Because of the League of Villains?" Hawks hummed in agreement. "You should all be aware that the League of Villains has taken a particular interest in missing person cases. We're not exactly sure why this sudden interest has appeared." Hitoshi watched Hawk's face twitch as he spoke. He supposed it must have been irritating to see villains rescuing people without understanding their motivations. "But it's been having a pretty negative effect on hero society. Take the assassination of Shinoda K." Everyone on the bus winced or cringed in some manner at the reminder of the incident. "Don't get me wrong. I'm glad that it came to light, and measures have been taken to prevent stuff like that from happening again. It's just that we can all agree that how it came to light wasn't exactly ideal." "So we're doing this to show that heroes are still reliable as an institution?" Ida asked. "Officially, yeah," Hawk said. "Have you guys had a class on hero politics or publicity yet? I'm not sure when you're supposed to get in-depth on that." "It's a second-year class, kiddo," Asui offered up from the back of the bus. Hawks nodded, leaning back in his seat slightly to tilt his head, to stare at the roof of the bus. "Okay, well, you'll understand this a bit better next year then. But what's happening is something of a publicity stunt to save face, but we've also got an unofficial mission statement behind this as well. Unofficially, this is also being done in an attempt to intercept the League of Villains. We've noticed a trend with the cases they're going after, so we'll be focusing on many of the same. The fewer of those cases there are open, the higher the chance we'll have of encountering them while investigating." He shrugged. "Close in the walls, see if we can get them. Like that one trash chute scene from Star Wars or something." Another hand was raised hesitantly, and Hitoshi was able to spot it belonging to Kirishima, before Hawks inclined his head at him to speak. "This team-up is super big. We're not going to be doing anything like the Shihasekai raid, will we?" Hitoshi watched the way Uraraka and Asui's faces twitched at the mention of the raid. He wasn't even there and he could feel his stomach churn a little. Just reading the news about the incident had felt brutal. Actually being there must have been horrible. Hawks was quick to reassure them amongst the quickly deteriorating mood. No. The Hasai incident was an unusually large group. It's one of the biggest Yakuza or organized crime cells we'd have to take down in decades, and Overhaul's quirk was exceptionally well suited for causing maximum casualties. The Shie Hasekai raid had oversights, and gaps where there shouldn't be any, and new protocols have been put in place to try and prevent it from happening again. Hawks placed his elbow on his knee, and propped his cheek in his palm as he continued to talk. Since you'll primarily be investigating cold missing person cases, it's more likely you'll be tracking down graves than Yakuza. Your mentors will make sure you don't see anything disturbing in those instances, but if you do end up going after someone who is hopefully still alive, it's important to understand that this team-up is primarily organized as a way to share information and call for backup. There's going to be many more sub-teams or groups within this little organization we've created that will carry out raids on smaller and less equipped cells. Nothing like the Shie Hasekai raid. We're actually expecting the amount of combative and medical personnel that we're going to require at each raid to be overkill, considering that we're going into this expecting to confront the League of Villains. Hitoshi and the other students on the bus relaxed slightly at the hero's words, but there was still an underlying current of tension at the possibility of encountering the League for a third, or in Hitoshi's case, first, time. Hawk seemed to pick up on the slight uneasiness, and gave them a close-eyed, easy, friendly smile. "I highly doubt any of you will run into them," he said. "So don't worry about them too much, okay?" Hawks opened his eyes again, gazing across all of them. Hitoshi felt something incredibly sharp and dangerous about the look. "I'll make sure you're all safe." Hitoshi wasn't sure whether the confident statement was comforting or worrying. Hawk's smile wasn't one of surety in his strength. It was confidence in his knowledge. Logically, Hitoshi understood that there would obviously be information that they wouldn't tell the student interns, levels of confidentiality and all that. But at the number 2 hero's brazen statement, Hitoshi couldn't keep himself from wondering what Hawks knew that they didn't.